Hi. So in today's video, I'll be talking to you about Jewish history from the period of the Second World War and a little bit about numerology, a little bit about intentional misinformation too. So if that's something for you, if you're curious about further events from my book, then stay tuned. So in the previous video, I was talking to you about seeing the man who actually just came to hypnotize me and who introduced himself as Mikołaj Lewandowski as my former friend, but he was not. So he was exploring, it looked like he was exploring how could he stop me from, finishing. Actually, the book was almost finished, from publishing the book. And so, one of the tricks he did was, he wanted to make me to give him the book. Like he would point to the word Auschwitz in the text and he would tell me, here you have a mistake. So I was thinking, he was my friend. In the moment when I was having a conversation with him, I thought, yeah, this is me, Mikołaj. But I didn't give him the book. And when I was handing in the book to various people, when I made a mistake and I did give a book to someone who was actually gypsy, then I had this mental turmoil that I made a mistake and gave the book to the witch. But it didn't work this time. And he was also checking, if it's about money, if it's about being a hero, if it's about, what is it about with my motivation? And turned out that, at that moment I thought about it was about the truth. Which is not to say I didn't make any mistakes, factual mistakes in the book. So whatever is in my power to correct will be corrected. So here we go. So I watched a discussion panel from Jewish Community Center, which would depict, three professors, three accomplished people who published books and so on. And, Ms. Bożena Szajnok would say that with regards to variety, so to say, variety of sources, that the reader is presented with contrasted material with variety of sources. Whereas Mr. Marek Wierzbicki talked about the fact that if we all would, intend to present the truth, then it would be, better, And therefore, when there was yet another question for him, the person conducting the entire panel had the question to Marek Wierzbicki, but then the person from the audience disturbed and started to ask such a long question that they just couldn't finish asking, They couldn't finish talking. So it looked to me like as if, Marek Wierzbicki said as much as he said, that we should have the right intention to present the truth, to want to present the truth. And then, the variety of materials you get is all of a sudden much better and easier to consume, because a lot of the sources will agree on a lot of the points, a lot of the aspects. Whereas what we see nowadays in a lot of branches of science and history and, nutrition, anything, people actually intentionally write books to introduce misinformation, to introduce false information, so that you wouldn't know, for example, that fasting is very good for you, so that you would be scared of fasting. Yeah. So my impression is that the man said as much as he said that we should have the intention to present the truth and it would be better. And therefore, right away, he was disturbed and, he couldn't just even hear the second question, because he shouldn't be asked the second question. It looked like that. And I don't think it's on the Jewish part. I think it's on the part of occultists, of people who deal with witchcraft. And then I watched yet another interview with conducted by Jewish Community Center, JCC Krakow, and it was an interview with Kasia Makuch. She also is an editor for Jewish PL. So Kasia said that she wrote that Polish people also murdered Jewish people during the Second World War. And she said that, because of that sentence, she had an investigation started against her by anti-Polish organization, which I'm quoting here, Kasia, a little bit, like you have anti-Semitic organizations. So anti-Polish organization works in a similar way if somebody, presents opinions that seem to be not favorable for a given ethnic group. So yet again, my impression is that somebody said just as much as one true sentence, and therefore, starting an investigation is a trial to just silence the people, and that's pretty much it. Because once you say one sentence, then you are going to go and say two more sentences in yet another article, right? So Kasia said that, she had to meet them, she had to explain why she said what she said in her article, and then after some time, the case was dropped. Investigation was closed. And then, in my book, I made a mistake with memorial commemorating the first transportation, because the first transportation, turns out, I have clarified with Gigi, with artificial intelligence from mastermind.com. So the first transportation from Tarnów happened to Polish political prisoners, and it was about 728 Polish political prisoners were taken to death camp in Auschwitz, and it happened on the 14th of June 1940. And then the first transportation of Jewish people took 2 years later, on the 11th of June 1942, from the main square in Tarnów. 3,500 Jewish people were transported to Belzec. And basically, there were three main death camps in Poland during that time. And those were in Auschwitz, Treblinka, and in Belzec. And in Tarnów, back then, there were about 50,000 inhabitants, and 25, so half of them were Jewish people, and the other half supposedly were Polish people. So in Poland, back then, we had the biggest community of Jewish people in the world, and there were 3.3 million of Jewish people in Poland, and around 3 million of them were killed in Poland. But generally, in the entire Europe, there were 6 million of Jewish people who were killed during the period of 6 years during the Second World War. So, they were also killed in places in countries such as Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, France. So altogether, there were 90% of population of Jewish people were killed. And what I want to tell you is that, during history class in primary school, in high school, nobody told me that the first transport of Jewish people took place from Tarnów. And this is the place where I lived all my life, and I went to school here. So nobody told us that. And, you know, the first transport took place on the 11th of June, which is the sixth month in the entire calendar. And I already also told you that, on the 26th of January, my dad was hit by the car at 6 o'clock. 6 years old boy fell off the door frame sometime later. And my dad's family house was number 6. And we also have lived in a flat that belonged to a block of flats. And the block of flats was number 6. And on the 26th of January, a pedophile was born in my family, and I believe there was yet one more pedophile born on the same day, but a different month. So when we look at number 6, 6 millions altogether, 6 millions of Jewish people were killed, and it was happening in a period of 6 years. And when we look at the way they were killed, they were starved because they liked fasting. They were suffocated because they liked practicing meditation. And they were also given the numbers. They were tattooed. And at least in the mysticism, Kabbalah, in Jewish tradition, numbers are important. And, I don't know how exactly Jewish people read numbers, but numbers are important in Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, and even one of the chapters in Torah is entitled Numbers, but this is more about stories presented in the Bible, in the Jewish Bible, the Torah. And, during the Second World War, just yesterday, I have seen a film which presented the tattooed Torah. That's the title of the film, if you would like to look at it. And during the Second World War, Torah was taken. They were taken from Jewish people, and they were covered with numbers, tattooed with numbers. And I think, therefore, because of that practice, that you could take from somebody something that is important to them and put numbers on that. There were numbers on the Torah, and there were numbers also in the books that would present the list of those Torahs collected. So I think that also is one of the dialogues with the Jewish belief, the Jewish tradition, because those numbers were put on their Torah, and it was put on their necks. It was put on their bodies, and all of a sudden people became numbers in a way. So that's, there could be more distance, which can work in a way that we have more distance to somebody when we start to perceive them as a number rather than as a person. So, all together, when I look at the way that these people were killed, I think that's the practice of witches. And when I look at the way my father was killed, I also see the practice of the witches, because Dad didn't see the sign. He didn't see the red sign, and it's also connected with the word sun. So I wrote about traffic lights, and I wrote a lot about identities of people who were sexually abused, and I have observed such patterns in my close environment. So there were a lot of dialogues with what I actually wrote, and Dad received a heart massage, but somebody didn't know how to help him. And this is what I precisely said a month or 2 months before his death, that I would help somebody if I only knew how. And then he stopped breathing. So basically, the way he was dying, he was suffocating to me. That's how I understand the fact that he wasn't breathing. He was disconnected from machines. And then, we didn't receive his body because we were told that his body was, the transport would take too long, and they had to burn him. And this is pretty much what would happen to people during the Second World War who were first gassed, suffocated, and then some of them were burned. So, the entire mechanism that Jewish people experienced during the Second World War, that was based on, guilt, like the borders were closed, they couldn't run and go and ask for help to other countries. And if somebody decided to ask for help, Polish people, then they would have to live in fear and maybe in guilt if that happened, because there was a death threat on anyone who would help Jewish people. Right. Basically, when we think about because thinking about the fact that you can't hide by the Polish people, you can't cross the border because you're not welcomed in a different country too. So in a way, we can think about the doors, and we can think about number 11 is a number of the door, because you have like two fillers standing next to each other. So in one of the numerology videos I have seen for sure such an interpretation, and also with Gigi we talked about the metaphor of the door in number 11. That's one of the ways you could see read that number, because the first transportation happened on the 11th of June, so 11/6, right? Okay. In that, when I was writing the book, I tell you slowly, step by step, how the process of writing looked like and in what ways I was also, in fact, intimidated. But, I was intimidated with my father's death. I was intimidated with war in Israel, although when the war started, I didn't know where was Israel on the map or who even lived in Israel. And I was intimidated with the blame over the protest, anti-Semitic protest. So first I had Mikołaj Lewandowski, so somebody who came over, and he wasn't actually Mikołaj Lewandowski, but we had this conversation, and there was a lot of exploration of my fears and the ways that one could stop me from publishing the book. And then that was the meeting I think in September that I had with Prof, and the same day I had the meeting with Mikołaj. And then, the anti-Semitic protest took place in New York on the 9th October 2024. And so it happened just one day after I placed my book on a pre-sale on Weebly, on a free website provided by Weebly. So I'm grateful for free website. Yeah. So there are just a few ways that I present you with today, but they're quite big and they're quite significant. So it's important that and I think Jewish history is obviously not the only history that is presented in Piglet, and that is going to be presented basically because obviously Piglet focuses a lot on that too, but I still am discovering a lot of other stories that possibly are acted out intentionally by people, by occultists, and okay. So okay, so it was a very, very serious topic today, so thanks for staying with me. And if you want to learn more about my book, if you want to read my book, then drop me a line at elkinga788@gmail.com. And if you want to check out my course, Amelia, if you want to learn more about victims of sexual abuse, then click the link below. And if you like this video, like it, share, subscribe, and you'll find all the information in the description of the film, on my website, on Instagram and Facebook accounts. So yeah, thanks for watching.